Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War news update for the 31st of July 2023. This is the second part. Please go and check out part one. It's just been restricted because, YouTube. That's why I split them into two. Anyway, here is, and also for time reasons too. Now, I've just come across this. This would have actually been in fact, the next two tabs would have been in my first video. But they've just come out now, and I think it's worth showing these to you actually. But this is also relevant to the Frontline. So this is a Frontline section I'm going to do now, and just use the Frontline. This is the first example of a cluster munitions being used like in a large way, right? Not just we've seen video evidence of a single cluster round being used here and a single one being used there. Just listen to this and watch.
Пряме влучання. Пряме влучання, хлопці, красавці, блядь. Ох, єбать ви їм насипали, красавці.
So that's, I think, really revealing. That's kind of how they should be used. I think when you are trying to clear out, say, a trench system, or you can see that that's probably a couple of kilometers wide, or at least a kilometer wide, where the smoke comes out. I don't know if you could see that, because it'd be quite small on your screen. But it's, I think, a significant difference in how we've seen them being used previously, which is trying to take out maybe a single target, or maybe a single dugout, trench line, something like that, but rather than in quite a mass way. And the number of explosions you hear there probably indicate only maybe three shells maybe being used, but using them all in tandem together and hitting around about the same time, that must be pretty effective, you would hope. This is the second bit that's only just come out. Southern Command, so Humanyuk saying this: Russian logistics have been severely impacted by the attacks on the Crimean bridges, and that is the Kerch Bridge and the Chonhar Bridge, and possibly the road and rail bridge at Chonhar. So Ukraine's Southern Command spokesperson Humanyuk said the Russian military is suffering from major logistical issues after July the 17th explosion on Crimean Bridge and a strike on Chonhar Bridge on the 29th. Speaking on television on the 30th, she said that Russia is using amphibious assault ships to ferry equipment across the Kerch Strait, since a bridge over the strait that connects the Crimean Peninsula with Russia's Krasnodar Oblast was damaged. So they've got to the point where they're using amphibious military equipment to transport supplies across the strait. I mean, that is a bit of a problem for them. Right, let's go to, well, first of all, a bit of an overview. In a week, the armed forces of Ukraine advanced another 12.6 square kilometers in the south and 2 square kilometers in the direction of Bakhmut. Slowed down a little bit in Bakhmut, to be honest, as they are finding quite stiff resistance from the Russian fighters there. Ukrainian sources are reporting that they have managed to halt and slightly push back the Russian advance to the west of the Zherebets River in the Luhansk and Kharkiv region. The Ukrainian element said to have once again liberated the settlement of Nadia. So I reported that yesterday, while forcing the Russians to withdraw from Novohayarivka. That is a continued pushback up in that Luhansk, that northeastern sector there. We'll of course look at this in more detail in the Frontline update. On that Svatova axis, here we have no reports saying the Ukrainian forces are restoring recent losses after restoring control over Nadia. Also, big parts of Novohayarivka and are under Ukrainian control again. A Russian attack towards Stelmakivka was repelled. Now, if this is the case, and if Ukraine have been able to do this without drawing on large portions of their counteroffensive resources, then this is really good. I mean, Russia have tried really hard to do a kind of counteroffensive to cause problems for the Ukrainians, and in the first kind of day or two, it's like, oh my goodness, they've moved 5 kilometers, and then a few days later, they're getting back to where they started. And what have they achieved? And it's not as big an issue, maybe, as some, including myself, might have been thinking it could be, right? Going down to Bakhmut now, Ukraine has captured more of the southern part of Klishchiivka in the Bakhmut region. So there, yep, fighting is ongoing in Klishchiivka, of course. No Reports says that the area of control north of Kurdyivka has increased. This is based on movement and the confirmation that Russian forces are no longer present west of the railway tracks. The Ukrainians are progressing inside Klishchiivka, and the main focus now is taking down artillery and dugouts. And indeed, just to give some evidence of that, so you've got railway track coming up here where it was all about getting over the canal. Now it's about getting over the railway track and moving on to the defensive line set up along the road that's on higher ground over here. But it seems like Klishchiivka, days are numbered for Russian defenses there, and Kurdyivka and Andrivka are really in the grey zones, very much so. So to take out these dugouts, they are using first-person view drones as opposed to, I guess, artillery. And it's this is testament, I think, to the success of first-person view drones. Right, they are able to be far more, I guess, far more accurate than using artillery. If you can fly a drone into a dugout, you don't have to walk in 10 artillery shells if they're not precision guided munition, or if you're using precision guided munition, then that's pretty expensive. It really is, FPV drones with munitions on board are just such effective weapons these days. They've become a really integral part of Ukrainian military maneuvers and whatnot. Right, this is now going down to southern Donetsk front line on the way to Zaporizhia. Here we have the Starominivka, I think it depends whether it's Ukrainian or Russian. The armed forces of Ukraine have improved the tactical situation in the area of the village of Staromyorsky. Fighting continues in the direction of the Grushevaya Gully and the village of Priutny in several directions. So this is coming from, I presume, a Russian source there. That the Ukrainians are increasing their control in the Staromyorsky area and the Priutny area. Now, remember yesterday, Syriac Maps was claiming that the Russians had done a counterattack in Staromyorsk, and I was like, I'm not sure that has actually happened, casting some doubt on those claims. Well, actually, it's worth looking at. I mean, here we have. Okay, let's read this. So Russian Vatnik Romanov. So he's one of the few Telegram bloggers who actually visits the front frequently and has channels of communication with Russian mid-level commanders. Underlying his comments is a growing sense of fear about what is really happening. So Romanov has been accurate over the last week or so, right? So if you're using inductive reasoning, you've got a good probability that what he says is correct, since the last bunch of things he says he has said have been correct, right? Whereas, Syriac Maps, I think, is much more towing the Russian MOD line at the moment and spreading possibly elements of disinformation into their mapping, right? In the Vremivka ledge, so that's basically Velika Novosilka area. Staromyorsky is completely under the control of the enemy, as in the Ukrainians. Attempts to fight him off were only on the air, not in reality. In other words, they were fake. So the claims of a counterattack by the Russians in Staromyorsky were not true. This is what Romanov, a Russian source, is saying. They were fake. Urizhny will stand from a day to 3, but no more. The reason for that, for what is happening, is a complete incompetence of the command responsible for the sector. And there are issues there because actually the river arguably separates two commands. So you've got the forces in Urizhny are a different set of forces than those in Staromyorsky. Anyway, that's well worth taking into account. Right, so we go back to sorry, where was I? I'm getting myself confused here. Right, here we are. So Ukraine continues its attempted encirclement of Urizhny. The Russians are getting cut off by Ukrainian forces. 3.6 square kilometers have been added to the liberated status, according to Global War Monitor. So fairly confident that things are looking good north of Urizhny and in the Staromyorsky area too. No Report says the Velika Novosilka axis. Ukrainians are pushing south of Staromilsky, which, if you're pushing south of Staromilsky, it means, hey, you must have control over Staromilsky. And on the flanks of Uruzhany, Ukrainian units reportedly reached the road between Novodonetsky and Kamenchuk, which is here. So I talked about that yesterday, how there's a road south of Novodonetsky. Uh, and the Ukrainians have entrenched themselves on the edges of Pryutny. And again, I talked about that yesterday. And then we have this claim here. So this is unconfirmed by other Russian sources, but this is a Russian source saying Novodonetsky. So Novodonetsky is the settlement to the west of. So it's this one here. It's to the west of Staromilsky. So if we go back to No Reports' map here, you've got Novodonetsky there, which is just to the west of Uruzhany and Staromilsky, but it's in the grey zone, very much as according to No Reports' map. Other mappers had that under Russian control, uh, but it might not be long for Russian control. So this source says Novodonetsky settlement and Novomayorsky, which is another settlement to the west of Novodonetsky, of the Volnovakha district in Donetsk region, came under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So this is claiming that those two settlements are now under Ukrainian control. Now, take that with a pinch of salt. That could be kind of doom posting, could be psyops, whatever. Reasons for abandonment are the lack of supplies and low morale of the mobilized. The Russian Defense Ministry deliberately weakens the Russian army with poor logistics on the eve of the summit of Saudi Arabia. Strelkov was, so this is Igor Strelkov, obviously someone who's a bit of a fan of Strelkov, Evil Gherkin, who was kind of one of the communicators of reality on the front lines as far as the Russians are concerned, even though he's ultra nationalist and a maximalist in what he wanted Russia to achieve. So he was quote taken out of the game for the reason that he could convey this to the military. So this is someone else kind of taking over the helm there, saying that actually things aren't going well, but you know the truth is it isn't easily available, when it comes to listening to Russian sources. Uh, yeah, so that could be some gains on the front line in on the southern axis there. Don't know much about what's going on further west of there. So Robotny, I've heard nothing about there. I've heard nothing about Kamyansky either. So uh, obviously it's quietened down there a little bit after some really heavy activity there last week. So now moving on to military aid, and as I've said already, there's not a lot to report here. Slovakia will hand over another two 155 mils Susanna 2 self-propelled howitzers. These are really decent bits of kit. They've got good range on them. To Ukraine tomorrow. That's the 1st of August. So that's excellent. These are the first two howitzers out of a total of 16 that Germany, Denmark, and Norway have purchased for Ukraine. That's fantastic from all of those nations involved, and they will be they use them already. I think one has been lost over the course of the war, yeah, these are decent bits of kit that are being well utilized by the Ukrainians. Now, last year, Bulgaria's export of specialized weapons production doubled to 1.7 billion euros, equal to 2% of the country's gross domestic product. Though not officially acknowledged, the ammunition is going to Ukraine. So this is Bulgaria. Bulgaria have been, as I said before, at the beginning of the war, apparently they were responsible for a third of Ukraine's total ammunition supplies coming in from abroad. I mean, Bulgaria have been the quiet, stalwart supporters in terms of military aid for Ukraine, primarily because they are not only in support of what Ukraine are doing, but they are manufacturers of Soviet era equipment, and that is super important. So, as Ukraine still has a huge number of Soviet pieces of kit, they need the ammunition for that, and their own indigenous manufacturing is very minimal. And many of the supplies in Eastern Europe and elsewhere around the world have been exhausted. So, Bulgaria is a huge component in provision of supplies for Ukraine. Now, I probably need to read the original Times article. I hadn't had a chance to do so. So this is just going off what this Ukrainian source is saying. Quote, Britain destroyed Challenger tanks that could have gone to Ukraine. So the MOD destroyed dozens of tanks that could have been sent to support the Ukrainian armed forces. 43 Challenger 2 tanks were disposed of. They were considered beyond repair. This is obviously going to cause quite a lot of consternation. Uh, I don't know what the situation is, whether they were just so fundamentally done that there was no chance of really supplying them. But then, spare parts, just take them out to Ukraine. Here are 43 tanks that you can do what you like with. It's up to you, rather than spending 4 million quid disposing of them. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But again, I need to look at the details. That could be an unfair representation of what's going on, or it could be stupidity. Um, on the other hand, here are some older tanks en route to Ukraine. Four Leopard 105 DK en route to Ukraine. I presume that DK part means they're from Denmark, um, or they are a Danish variant. Sorry, especially since this is a city of Lomza in Poland. So possibly on the way from Denmark through Poland to Ukraine. Germany, Denmark, and Netherlands are involved in delivery and refurbishment of over 135 Leopard 105s. That is phenomenal. And I've talked before about how important this will be, that when you are getting attrition of Ukrainian equipment on the front line, you will need a continual supply of decent enough stuff. Uh, and Leopard 185s, if they're being refurbished with decent optics and fire control systems so that they can spot targets before targets can spot them and hit targets first, then that's going to be really useful. Of course, the issue with any equipment is nothing. Like we've seen this with Leopard 2s, with Bradleys, with their Brat armor. Nothing can really protect you from being hit by ATGNs from two sides, mines from underneath, and artillery from above. Nothing is impregnable, and so actually, there's almost more rationale for sending this kind of tank rather than your really expensive, really decent tanks that are still going to get knackered in those kind of assaults. Get more of these tanks that can really do a job, and send them in. So actually, I'm coming round to the idea that these kind of Leopard 105s would be really valuable for frontal assaults. Uh, but I could be wrong. That could be me trying to see things with a silver lining, but I don't think it is. Like but then the question is, when do you use the really decent, expensive tanks? When do you use your best Leopard 2s? Like if you're like, well, they're going to get knackered using that kind of frontal assault, so we need to use something a bit more rubbish. Then, well, when do you use them? What's the point of having them if you're not going to use them? So there's arguments from both sides. On the other hand, here are some up armored levers for the Russian armed forces. Uh, the a bit of Mad Max going on here. I mean, they look fairly newly done up, but I can't say that they look particularly threatening. Those vehicles. I mean, it's 1970s there. Anyway, that's what I have from Russian equipment. I'm sure they're getting other better stuff somewhere, but that's what I've been uh, able to find. Right, moving on to geopolitical stuff, and as you can see, only two tabs. This will be a much shorter video, to the joy of many, I'm sure. Czechia freezes assets of Russian oligarch with ties to Putin. It's always good when everyone works together and there are these kind of freezes or sanctions that are taking place within many countries around the world. It needs to be a really multilateral project to try and hit Russia where it hurts, which is usually in the purse. Czechia has blocked the bank accounts and frozen the assets of sanctioned Russian oligarch Vladimir Yevtushenkov. Radio Prague reported on July the 30th, citing Czech television. Good, good, good. And here, the last thing to show you, I mean, it really is a quiet day geopolitically speaking. Activists in Georgia again made tourists from Russia know that they are not welcome. Later, police stepped in to keep protesters back and allow the Russians access. And I saw the arrest of one Ukrainian, actually, in Georgia, one Ukrainian woman involved possibly in this one. So we saw the other day uh, Georgians give hassle to a cruise ship that was docking in Georgia and then left 2 days early because they were getting so much issue from Georgians. Here we have Russians in coaches. And what's great about this is it's quite positive, right? This is like, let's have some music, let's do a peaceful protest, but basically these guys aren't moving. And what they see inside the coach is a bunch of us being really positive for Ukraine, not like people you'd be like, I hate you, you're smashing stuff up or whatever. These are guys, we just stopped the coach, we're singing positive songs, and we're letting you know that you guys suck and your war sucks. Now, either those Russians are going, human psychology being what it is, those Russians are probably going to entrench and be even more defensive of their position. In psychology, it's called the backfire effect. When you present people with rational evidence against their position, there's a high likelihood that they are not going to change their minds, that they are going to entrench in their original positions and even feel stronger. So sometimes activities like this can backfire. They might go away resenting Georgians and Ukrainians even more. But there's got to be some element of them being like realizing that, hey, not everyone likes us, that maybe the war isn't a great idea, or at least it's causing me a great deal of inconvenience. So it might not be that I disagree with the war on political and moral principles. It's just that I really want a holiday and you're stopping me having a nice holiday. So stop the war type thing. It could be an element of that happening. But if anyone knows Georgian or whatever language is being, I presume it's Georgian or Russian, I'd be interested to know what they're shouting there. Uh, just hope that that has the desired effect. I mean, that's a good piece of demonstration, in my opinion. Anyway, there you go. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you in a Frontline update that will be following shortly.